Hi, welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. On today's program, we're going to talk about the dream that everyone working has. Can I retire early? And for those of you already retired, can I stay retired and be happy? We're going to talk about it. And to help us, we're going to bring in Nancy Anderson, a certified financial planner. Stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Early retirement. What does that mean? This is an interesting thing to think about. For a lot of people who are working, it's the American dream, right? We're ready to be done. For people who are already retired, well, it's like, well, it's not really about early retirement. It's more about staying retired and not having to go back to work. The thing that's interesting to me is we think about early retirement. For the longest time, that's been what people look forward to, is work as long as you have to, and when you have accumulated what you need, then you make this graceful exit, and then you enjoy basically a long vacation. That's how it's worked. Now, in the last century, we've seen life expectancy really lengthen. Not unusual for people to live 80s, 90s, 100. Just open the paper, you'll see it. Well, so what does early retirement mean in that context? You know, an early retirement used to mean what? 50, 55, maybe 60? You know, when people have an expectation about drawing their Social Security in their mid-60s, which is kind of where most people take their Social Security, early retirement usually means something like that, 50, 55, 60. But in a world where we live longer, early retirement might just mean retiring in your mid-60s. Well, whatever it is, the idea is, how do we do that? How do we retire early? Well, obviously, we need to do some planning. We need to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. We've got all of our investments and our plans properly structured. We know how long we need to work. We know how we need to invest. These are all things that are important. But also knowing what you need to do in terms of savings, and also what you need not to do. And that's the subject of today's program. What not to do, what to be careful about. What do you need to do to make this work? So I hope you enjoy the program. We're going to cover a lot of those details. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Can you really retire early? That's a great question. And to answer it, I'm very fortunate to bring into the studio again with us is Nancy Anderson, certified financial planner. And she works for KeyBank in Salt Lake City, Utah. 25 years experience in the financial field. She contributes to Forbes.com in the personal finance and retirement planning area. So happy to have her again with us in the studio. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks for having me. It's great
Glad
to
have you with us. Yes, very much. Excellent. Well, so we've got another very important topic for you and I to talk about. And this is one that I know you get a lot of questions about. I get a lot of questions about. In fact, it's the American dream to retire early, whatever that means. Because we're getting to a point in our human history where we're living longer, a lot longer, and so retiring early, ironically, might mean retiring as our ancestors did maybe at the time. But for people who want to say, look, how do I retire early? What are first of all, is it doable, absent winning the lottery?
Guess what? The answer is yes. It's doable.
That's all you need to know, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so it's doable.
Got to give you a caveat, though.
There's a caveat, okay. There's always a catch.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Okay.
Right?
So you have to be, I'm going to go out on a limb here. You got to be disciplined. You got to be careful. You've got to be prudent. You got to make some sacrifices.
And do some planning.
Planning.
Yeah. But it's totally worth it. And you talked about retirement. It's like, what is retirement?
What does that mean?
Yeah. So the number one question I get from my clients is, am I able to retire?
Okay.
But a lot of people don't want to.
But they want to know they can.
Yeah, they want to know they can.
I would
Financial
imagine,
freedom.
Yeah, I imagine for a lot of people that changes the way they view their work. you know, if I get up in the morning and I go, I don't really have to go to work today if I don't want to. It might change the way I view that work, like, or does it enable people, in your experience, to maybe make that career change they've always wanted to make?
Most definitely. Move, maybe they want to move to a different destination, and they can maybe downsize, or what do they call it, downshift?
Yeah, right sizing, downsizing.
Downshift a little bit, and maybe make a little bit less, but move to, well, I live in Park City. I work in Salt Lake, but I live in Park City, Utah, and there are a lot of people want to live there. It's wonderful, the Four Seasons and all that. Or, you know, here in Daytona Beach, same thing. People want to move here.
Sure.
So if you have the financial freedom knowing that you can retire, it can make a difference in your existing work. It can add some more passion. Like, you know what? I think I want to stay.
Yeah.
And I want to maybe take some risks in my position that you might not have been able to take.
Good point.
If you were worried about you needed that job. But when you don't need the job and you can flip the switch, it can really change your life.
Now, Nancy and I aren't counselors, but in the financial planning work that we do, we find ourselves counseling people a lot. We have to have a little bit of that psychological perspective because, you know, the ironic thing about building a financial plan is that by having a plan, it lets you take a different perspective. And that's why, of course, you and I signed up for this, is that you can view the work or what you're doing with a perspective that, you know, it's going to be okay. And even if you end up working longer, like you say, you've got that plan in place that only gets better.
Yeah, some people haven't planned at all. Like they're just starting maybe at 50 and they think, oh, there's no way that I could retire at 65 or 67 or whatever. But the main thing is the steps that you take will always help you move forward, so it doesn't matter. But people can actually retire early, and one of my neighbors just did.
Yeah, you've got somebody you just worked with.
Yeah, so it's actually my neighbor, and she just retired at age 52, which is really rare these days.
That's rare.
Yeah. So her name is Sybil. So we had an open house, so I invited her over, and I said, Dish, I want to know.
How'd you do
it?
Yeah.
And my readers on Forbes, and obviously, we all want to know how she did it, that it's rare.
Right.
And that was pretty exciting. She had a lot of information in terms of like, well, you know, how do you do it? And so I think you're going to ask me the question, so I'll just jump in. But the number one thing was that it wasn't one thing. It was a series of steps that she took.
So she made the decision, or she thought ahead about what she wanted to do. She then put herself on a path of deliberately doing certain things and not doing others to position her to where she could make this shift.
Exactly. You said the path. The path started for her 20 years prior, so she's at 32.
Okay.
Which is also kind of rare. And so she went to see a financial planner and found a good one, and she went to see him about life insurance. And he said, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I want to retire early. And he said, well, let's make a plan to do that.
Yeah.
So she started, instead of just buying life insurance, that meeting with that planner changed her life, which is so exciting for us as planners.
Totally,
Because
that's what we signed up for.
that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So she started a plan to retire early.
And you don't have to do it at 30. I want to make sure the viewers know. You don't have to do it at 30 if you're starting at 35, 40, 50, whatever. The sooner you start, the better off you are. And a lot of our viewers are retired already. And so they say, well, hey, do I need to turn the channel? Why am I listening to this? You still want to think about these things and make sure that the steps you take now are going to serve you well in the long term, and some of the things that we need to think about. And I get a lot of questions, and we'll get into some of because this is not all peaches and cream. There are some sacrifices, there are some important decisions you need to make, and we need to get into those with Nancy. So one of the things for people who are, not at 30 planning this, but maybe they're at 60 saying, okay, look, I've never worked with a financial planner before. I have this happen, and I'm sure you do. They come in, they say, what do I do? How do I, I got a long road, how do I get there? I'm not even sure where I am and how to get where I want to be. So one of the big things is going to be how you will take Social Security. And this is a big one if you're going to retire early. The earliest you can take Social Security under current law is 62. Mm-hmm. If you do that, you're going to take a reduction, okay? So this is an important part. So I imagine when you work with the folks that you've seen retire early, Nancy, that getting to 62 or getting to 65 for Medicare qualification was a big part. You've got to be able to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and you're right, on the Social Security planning, every year that you delay, the value or your monthly income goes up by 8%.
8%.
So so if you can self-fund those earlier years, that gap, that can make a difference if you can delay.
Well, I think that the key thing, and I know you and I have talked about this many times, is it's so individualized. You have to look at your situation. I've had people come in and meet with me, and I'm sure you have too, Nancy, where, you know, they don't buy green bananas. I mean, they're like, oh, I'm not going to make it to 90. You're crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to live. Everybody dies by 70. You have to look at your individual situation. If you've got a history of longevity, well, you might be very well served by waiting and do, as you said, fill in those gaps. But if you don't have a lot of longevity in your family and you know your own personal health is not really going to support that longer life expectancy, then it does make sense maybe to take Social Security earlier.
Yeah, I think that's one of the pieces of the financial puzzle, but just in terms of income streams, the Social Security can make a big difference. The Social Security planning, and that's where, I mean, I hate to toot our own horns here, David.
That's okay, you
but
can do it a little bit.
Yeah, working with the planner. Working with the planner makes a difference because we can map it out for you and look at, you know, should you take it here? Should you take it there? What difference would that make? Yeah, it does make a difference.
Well, and if you're going to do that, if you're going to, you know, pursue this goal of retiring early, you're going to have to bridge to 62, at least for Social Security, and bridge to 65 for Medicare.
Yeah.
So one of the big things as we look at people who want to make this shift, and we spoke about it earlier, maybe they look at their employment arrangement differently. Maybe part of working with their employer on their work plan for the rest of the time they'll be with the company is to, you know, maybe negotiate health insurance and maybe working part-time so that you can get, because if you shop health insurance, it's, for people who have done that, it's so expensive, even with all the attempts at healthcare reform. It's so expensive, and it becomes a very large number that as planners, we have to try to figure out how people pay for. So if you can just get to Medicare 65, that's gold. So if you can work part-time or you can find a way to have that health insurance cover, check with your employer, look at your spouse's plan if you're married, take COBRA, whatever, get there however you can to bridge that gap.
So in our case, the example I gave of Sybil is she and her husband are staggering their retirements just for that reason, David. So he's going to retire, well, they'll still have a gap, but he's going to retire at 60. She's retiring at 52, but she's still on his medical. That makes a difference. Also, we have a lot of clients who will work, cut down, downshift with their company and do a part-time for medical. And then there's a lot of people in Park City, Utah, that work part-time at a ski resort, ski resort, or even a coffee shop for the medical because they enjoy it. They get a little bit of extra income, but that can make a difference too.
That's excellent.
So it can be done, but you, like I said, that's part of not being easy. Like when you think retirement, you think, well, that means not working.
People think of it as a cliff, like you go over the cliff and you're done. It doesn't have to be. It can be a long sloping downhill, kind of like a ski slope where you kind of go down slowly. What they call that, the bunny slopes. So go down the bunny slope of your retirement exit. The other big thing that people do not know or may not be aware of is that with your 401ks, your retirement accounts, you do have the ability to tap them without a penalty before 59 and a half. You just have to be very careful how you do it. Because if you do, well, you just take a bunch of money out of your IRA trying to pay these bills we're talking about, then you can incur a 10% tax penalty plus the tax on top of everything else. So there are ways to do it, but you have to, again, not to belabor the point, but you have to plan it out.
You know, I think a lot of the viewers might not realize that with a 401k versus an IRA, with the 401ks, if you leave it with your employer and you retire at 55, you can actually pull money out without a penalty. You still pay taxes on it, of course, and that's what David was talking about. But with an IRA, if you pulled the money out of an IRA at 55, just in general, then there's going to be a penalty and the taxes. So you have to really make sure that you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, and the right way would include, you know, you're taking what we call systematic withdrawals. There's a tax code provision, section 72T, as you know, Nancy. Our viewers are going, don't care, just tell me how to get the money out. But there's a systematic way of getting the money out. You have to follow the rules, and if you break the rules, penalties and taxes abound. It's ugly. So
Right,
there
right,
are
yeah.
ways. And if you're disabled, of course, there are provisions for that as well. So these
Yeah.
are all things you've got to factor into how you're going to draw that money.
But I think the main thing is having the money there in the first place,
Yes.
right? And that's one of the reasons that Sybil and the rest of us who are saving at least 20% of their income. So just, maxing out as much as you can, whether it's in the 401k or whether it's in a Roth IRA or in a brokerage account, in a mutual fund, in tax advantage life insurance.
Sure.
But just saving, and that's part of that hard part where it's not always easy to retire early, but if you save, that's the first thing.
Yeah, and Nancy and I are both fans of this all of the above approach to planning and saving for your retirement, where you have that Roth, you have the 401k, you have the tax-deferred accounts, you have tax-free accounts, you have this money that's in a non-qualified brokerage account, which is basically money you've put in after tax. We like that. It's like a good energy plan, all of the above. Because
Right, yeah.
you can tap on them and use them to bridge some of these holes and gaps and fill in. And also being able to pull on certain funds if we have a market drop, which is inevitable, it's coming, that you can pull on those funds. And especially if you're taking an early retirement where you may not be able to draw on the bulk of your qualified IRA, 401k type of accounts, you need to be able to pull on other money. So that's a key part of it. What do you say to people who say, well, okay, I'm already retired. Should I think about pulling more on my 401k or less? Should I take out a home equity line and have that pull on? Do you like those ideas?
Well, I think I like having flexibility. So you look at the circumstances. So let's say, for example, we have high income taxes or a market drop. So instead of pulling from the 401k, which is taxable and invested,
Sure.
then maybe using the home equity line as a bridge. But that's why I like having clients to have different options. And it actually kind of makes it fun for us. It's like, okay, it's like solving a problem.
Yeah.
Like, how can we do that? But the one of the issues in retirement is the tax drag. So if you can find some tax advantage or tax-free ways to pull money out, like using the home equity, I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, the key thing is not to pull all your money from the IRA, unless that's all you have. And we understand that that may be the case, just depending on how you've accumulated your financial resources. But having the ability to pull on those different accounts, it can't be emphasized enough, because there might be a period where you need to pull from that cash account to avoid, like you said, Nancy, the pulling from an account that is down in value. All like to buy on sale, not sell on sale, right?
Yeah.
So being able to do that, but the tax consequences, you want to be careful. You don't want to pull a whole bunch from an IRA one year and then pull from cash the next. Ideally, you do what Nancy and I recommend. You levelize your income, your taxable income, by drawing from all of these different sources. And that is even more important when we talk about this early retirement, because you've got to be so careful with those tax accounts.
When you think about early retirement too, so if someone retires at 50, and they live to 100, right? They've worked they haven't even worked for 50
Right.
years. They've lived for 50 years, and then they have to support themselves for 50 years. So the tax drag can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And then also just planning how they're going to take the income stream. Yeah,
Very
but and if we
important.
look back to my really happy neighbor who is just hiking right now, or whatever she's doing, she's doing some kind of a 100-mile bike ride or something too, that basically for her, she saved well ahead of when she's going to retire. So they started saving 100% of her income ahead of when she's going to retire. Well, she's a little extreme,
Well,
right?
I tell you, Nancy, I tell you what, we'll have people go to the website. We'll have them check out Forbes.com for more of your articles on this subject. I'm so glad you're with us. You can also go to PlanStrongerTV.com, learn more about what Nancy's doing, and more information on our subject today. Thanks for being with me, Nancy.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it's time for viewer questions, and I've got a big one for you, so I'm going to read this one to you as well. This question comes from Andrew in Ormond Beach, and Andrew asks, I just turned 50, and I want to know what I should be doing in my retirement accounts. How should I be investing? How do I know I am saving enough? Are there any specific moves I should be making? great question. You know, it's very important to think about your stage of life in terms of your financial decisions. You know, where you are, if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, at each stage of life, there are very important things you need to be thinking about. And they shift and they change. Your insurance needs are different at 20 than they are at 70. How you invest your money is completely different. So Andrew's question is excellent. So the very first thing we need to do in answering this question, and I'm a big, big believer in this, it's one of the things you'll hear me talk about a lot, is you always have to have cash, you always have to have liquidity, first and foremost. So before we make any special moves because of being 50 years old, how much cash do we have on hand? Do we have enough cash to get to for emergencies? That's number one. Number two, do we have any debts? Anything where you're paying interest more than, say, 5%? I'd like to work on those, whittle those down. We've got those things taken care of. We also want to look at long-term care insurance. Yes, I said it. At 50 and above is when you need to start thinking about long-term care. There's a sweet spot there where you can start looking at long-term care. The premiums haven't gotten real high yet, and you can lock in a rate that hopefully will be a good rate for you and within your budget, and you can pay for it while you are younger and hopefully while you are in your working years so that when you retire, you don't have to maybe carry that extra expense into retirement. So after you've done those things, the next thing I would look at is housing debt. You know, get rid of any short-term debt, credit card debts. That's all part of the equation. But after I've got cash on hand, short-term debt, long-term care, then I want to look at housing debt. Now, we have to think about that within the framework of the rest of your situation, your taxes, all of that. So housing debt's the next thing. And then after that, I want to know about contributions to your 401k or your other employer-sponsored retirement plan through work. If you've got access to a 401k or a 403b or whatever tax shelter type of account that the employer offers, or if they don't, your IRA contributions, all of those, once you hit 50, you can actually increase. There's a catch-up provision. Very cool. Catch-up provision for putting more money than somebody younger into that account. So if you haven't already been putting the maximum, put the maximum in based on the current tax law. And then there's this catch-up provision where you can put in even more. So max all that out. If you still have some cash to work with, wonderful. Look at putting money into an investment account. Now, if you're 50, and I'm doing the math, you might have kids, though, going to college. If that's your case, then do you have enough money put away for college for kids? Do you have their plans all set? I'm a big fan of having money available. Again, this liquid, there's different ways of saving for college. I like liquidity because things happen and they come up and they don't always fit in a nice, neat box. However you choose to do it, make sure you've got the money set aside to help with the college expense. And again, you can invest after that, but do those things up first. So great question, Andrew. I'm so glad you asked it. I think it's critical for people to be thinking ahead about retirement while they're still on the front end of this, right? When you turn the corner and you're ready for the back nine of life, think about how you're going to do that. Now, if you'd like me to answer your question on this program, you can email your question to me at questions@PlanStrongerTV.com. Or if you'd just like more information about the program, go to PlanStrongerTV.com. Now, one more thing before you go. When we start talking about planning for retirement, especially if it's going to be an early retirement, again, that American dream, Social Security can be a big part of that decision. Now, for most people, the earliest age they can draw Social Security is at 62. There are a few exceptions, but 62. At 62, if you choose to draw at that point, you're going to have a permanent reduction in your Social Security benefit. It's about 75% of what you would get at full retirement. So let's say your full retirement at 66, you would get $2,000 a month. You'd get $1,500 a month at age 62. Now, if you have a history of longevity in your family, if your health also is a factor and you're in good health, and you think, yeah, I'm probably going to live as long as my mom or my grandmother or aunt or uncle or whoever, you might want to think about or rethink that decision about when to take Social Security. Now, if everybody dies at a young age, obviously drawing sooner might be better. So Social Security, big part of the decision about retiring early. I'm glad you're with us. Hope you enjoyed the program. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.